no one saw it coming. Just when fans thought they had figured out the direction of Heartland Season 19, the finale delivered a twist so powerful, so emotionally intense, it left viewers breathless. The kind of twist that doesn't just shake up the story, it reshapes the entire future of Heartland. In a single, unforgettable moment, the ranch that stood as a symbol of healing and home was thrust into a storm of secrets, sacrifice, and a revelation that could change everything for the Fleming Borden family. If you thought Heartland was predictable, think again. The truth that finally came out in the finale will leave a lasting scar. Season 19 has been a slow burn of emotional rebuilding, hard-won victories, and growing tensions beneath the surface. Amy, after years of grief and soul-searching, finally started to rediscover her spark, both in her work with horses and within herself. Lindy had grown older and more curious, and the bond between mother and daughter felt stronger than ever. Jack, ever the pillar of wisdom, continued to keep the ranch and the family together. But all season long, there was something lingering in the air, a quiet sense that not everything was as peaceful as it seemed. Behind Amy's calm strength was a deep ache that never truly went away. Ty's memory wasn't just a presence in flashbacks or stories, it lived in every corner of the ranch. Every time Amy passed his old jacket, every time she saw Lindy ride with the same fierce determination he once had, she felt the pull of the past. And while she had found ways to move forward, a part of her heart remained frozen in time. That inner struggle added weight to every decision she made, and the audience could feel it. Meanwhile, Lou's political life kept colliding with her role in the family. Her time as mayor had opened new doors, but it also came with secrets. There were decisions she made behind closed doors that were never shared with the family, deals about the future of the land, about legal rights, about old documents tucked away in town archives. At first, they seemed harmless, even practical. But in hindsight, they were the first cracks in the foundation. Georgie, after her return earlier in the season, seemed determined to make her mark again. As an athlete, as a daughter, as a young woman who had grown from her time away. But she wasn't just back for family. She had questions. Questions about things no one wanted to answer. Especially about the night Ty died. Especially about something that never quite added up in the medical reports. Something Amy refused to talk about. All these emotional threads were carefully woven throughout the season, and in the finale, they finally unraveled. In the closing stretch of the episode, just as the family prepared for what should have been a moment of celebration, Lindy's riding competition, a family dinner, and the quiet triumph of healing, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a message. A handwritten letter from a name Amy hadn't heard in years. The handwriting was shaky, old-fashioned, and unmistakable. It was from a man connected to Ty's past, someone who knew what really happened the night of the poacher's attack, someone who had been silent for years. In a few haunting lines, the letter revealed a different version of events. It hinted that Ty's death wasn't just an accident, but something more deliberate, something planned. Amy stood frozen, the letter trembling in her hands. As the sun set over Heartland, her world, and the world of everyone around her, shifted once again. The truth had come knocking, and this time, it refused to be ignored. The moment Amy read the letter, the world around her seemed to vanish into a deafening silence. Each word etched into the paper carried the weight of a buried truth. The letter was from Clint Riley, the probation officer who once played a pivotal role in Ty's journey from a troubled youth to the man Amy fell in love with. His name brought with it a flood of memories. But now, he wasn't reaching out as a friend. He was confessing. Clint admitted he had been contacted years ago by someone linked to the poacher responsible for the gunshot that ultimately killed Ty. At the time, the official story was that Ty's death was due to a blood clot caused by the gunshot wound, a tragic medical complication. But the letter painted a more sinister picture. According to Clint, there had been signs that the poacher hadn't acted alone, and that Ty had been targeted intentionally. Someone wanted him gone. The motives weren't clear, but the suggestion that it wasn't just a random act of violence sent a chill down Amy's spine. Amy didn't know whether to believe it. Her first instinct was denial. Why now? Why after all these years? Why reopen a wound she had fought so hard to heal? But something about the letter rang true, not just in its words, but in the guilt behind them. Clint wrote about how he had kept quiet out of fear and shame. He thought the truth would destroy the family. But watching Amy from afar, watching her carry the weight of a lie, had become unbearable. Amy stood alone in the barn with the letter clutched in her hands. The sun had set, and the silence around her felt heavier than ever. For a long time, she didn't move. The ache in her chest wasn't just grief. It was betrayal. She shared the letter with Jack first. Jack, always the steady hand, didn't speak for a long while after reading it. He sat at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed, his fingers tracing the edge of his coffee mug. "I always knew there was something off about that day," he finally said, "but I never wanted to dig. We were too busy surviving." Lou, when told, reacted differently. Her political instincts kicked in. She saw the potential danger in making this public, not just for the family, but for Heartland itself. If this turned out to be true, everything would change. Public trust, Ty's legacy, even the ranch's reputation could be at risk. But Amy didn't care about politics. She cared about the truth. For her, Ty wasn't a symbol. He was her heart. And if someone had taken him from her deliberately, she needed to know why. Georgie, already suspicious from earlier in the season, pushed harder. She began digging, using her contacts and sharp instincts. She even reached out to people from Ty's past, tracing names and places connected to his early years. What she found only deepened the mystery. There had been a man, a former associate of the poacher, who had disappeared shortly after the incident. No one ever followed up. The case had been closed too quickly, too cleanly. As these pieces started to come together, Amy's quiet grief turned into something sharper. Not rage, not yet, but determination. For years, she had tried to move forward. For Lindy, for the ranch, for herself. But now, she was being pulled back into the darkness of that night. And this time, she couldn't walk away. Amy wasn't alone, though. Jack stood by her side. Georgie took the lead in uncovering what had been buried. Even Tim, stubborn as ever, threw himself into the search, driven by a need to protect what was left of his family. And Lou, though cautious, offered legal support, trying to prepare the family for what might come next. The finale didn't give answers. It gave fire. A fire that reignited pain, but also purpose. Heartland has always been about healing. But healing doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from facing the truth, no matter how painful it may be. And now, for the first time in years, Amy wasn't just surviving. She was hunting for the truth, and whatever she found would change Heartland forever. The search for the truth became an obsession, not just for Amy, but for everyone who loved Ty. Every whispered doubt that had been ignored, every loose end dismissed as coincidence now felt like a piece of something larger. Amy's days, once filled with horses and quiet routines, were now tangled in investigation, emotion, and old wounds. Georgie uncovered the first major clue. A name, Travis Haynes, a drifter with a criminal record who had briefly worked near the wildlife reserve where Ty was shot. No one had mentioned him before, not in the reports, not in court, not in the news. But Travis had been there. And then he had disappeared. With Lou's help, they dug into old property records and found that Travis had lived on land owned by a shell corporation. That corporation, to their shock, was once linked to a now defunct oil company, the same one that Ty had protested years ago for polluting local rivers and harming wildlife. It was a battle he had fought quietly, fiercely, and with purpose. At the time, it seemed like a small personal mission. Now, Amy was beginning to wonder, had that battle made him a target? Amy's grief began to transform. She had once accepted Ty's death as cruel fate. But the possibility that it had been revenge for standing up for what was right, that lit a fire in her soul. She wasn't just trying to uncover the past anymore. She was defending Ty's honor. His death could no longer be allowed to sit in silence, but with every step forward came pushback. A warning arrived one morning. A single, unmarked envelope left at the gate of the ranch. Inside, it was nothing but a newspaper clipping, the original article about Ty's death, with the words, "Let the dead rest," scribbled across it in red ink. No name, no return address, just a message meant to instill fear. Jack wanted to call the police immediately, but Amy resisted. She knew they had little to go on, And worse, they might attract the wrong kind of attention. If this went deeper than just a random shooting, if it involved people with power, then they had to be smart. Still, Amy couldn't help but feel the walls closing in. She wasn't just battling for truth, she was protecting her daughter, her home, her memories. And the weight of it all started to wear on her. There were nights when she'd stare at the ceiling, Ty's voice echoing in her mind, asking her to be strong, asking her not to stop. Then came the breakthrough. Tim, who had been distant through most of the search, surprised everyone when he tracked down an old contact from his rodeo days, someone who remembered Travis. They met in a dusty diner outside of town. The man was nervous, jittery, but he talked. He remembered Travis bragging about getting paid off after taking care of a problem. He didn't know details, but the timing matched. The night of the shooting, Travis had come into town flushed with cash and scared. Days later, he vanished. This wasn't proof? Not yet. But it was enough to reignite the search. Lou used her mayoral connections to push for a reopening of the case. At first, the authorities refused. They cited lack of evidence, statute limitations, and the emotional impact on the family. But public pressure started to mount. Fans of Heartland, both in the world of the show and its storytelling, began rallying around Amy's demand for justice. What had started as a personal journey of grief became a fight for truth that echoed through the community. In the final scenes of the episode, Amy found herself once again in the barn. The same barn where Ty had once told her he loved her, where they had shared dreams, grief, and laughter. She stood there now, a woman transformed, not just the girl who had lost the love of her life, but a mother, a fighter, a survivor. And then she found something. Tucked in an old box of ties, one she hadn't opened in years, was a USB drive. On it, video clips, journal entries, and one unfinished letter. It was Ty's voice, his thoughts. And in that letter, Ty spoke of fears he hadn't told anyone. He mentioned being followed, getting threatening notes, and most chillingly, he wrote, "If something ever happens to me, tell Amy not to stop looking." Amy broke down, not in despair, but in clarity. Ty had known. Ty had felt it. And now she had proof he had tried to warn her. The camera fades on Amy standing in the barn, holding the drive against her chest. Her eyes are filled with tears, but her voice is steady. "I won't stop, Ty." Not now. The twist wasn't just that Ty might have been murdered. The real twist was that he had tried to protect Amy from the truth. And now, she was finally ready to face it. The discovery of Ty's hidden USB drive turned everything upside down. For Amy, it wasn't just evidence. It was a voice from beyond, a final connection with the man she had loved and lost. The video clips were personal, moments of Ty recording himself late at night in the barn, sometimes after a long day, other times when something was clearly weighing on his mind. He spoke about his fears, not for himself, but for Amy and Lindy. He talked about strange encounters, people asking questions about his protests, threats that he brushed off but now seemed deadly serious. One clip stood out more than the others. Ty sat in the dark, barely lit by the barn's dim lamp, his voice low. "If anything ever happens to me, Amy," he said, "don't trust the official story. I've made enemies. Not the kind that wear ski masks, the kind that wear suits, the kind that smile in public and ruin lives in private." His face was tense, his eyes full of both fear and love. Keep Lindy safe, and keep fighting for what's right. Amy watched that clip over and over again. The pain in his voice was real. He knew something was coming. He sensed the danger, and he kept it all hidden, trying to shield his family from the storm he feared would follow him. Armed with the USB, Lou moved swiftly. She arranged a meeting with the town's legal advisor and presented the evidence. At first, there was skepticism. The death had occurred years ago, and reopening a closed case wasn't something the town council wanted on its plate. But then the letter from Clint, the warning at the ranch gate, Travis's name, and now Ty's own voice, it became impossible to ignore. The media got wind of it. Headlines started surfacing. Heartland tragedy reopened. Was Ty Borden's death murder? Reporters arrived at the ranch, cameras flashing, questions flying. Amy kept her head down, focusing on the truth, not the noise. But the attention brought both support and danger. That night, Another letter came. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Stop digging, or the next grave will be yours. No signature, no clue, but the message was clear. Someone was getting nervous. The tension in the family rose. Jack, fiercely protective, insisted on security. Tim took to patrolling the ranch at night, keeping his shotgun close. Lou worked the legal angle, while Georgie kept searching, piecing together a trail that led further than they ever imagined. Then came the breakthrough. A name buried in an old invoice. A payment from the oil company, disguised as a wildlife conservation grant, had gone directly to Travis Haynes 3 weeks before the poachers' attack. That link was undeniable. It wasn't random, it was orchestrated. Ty had been eliminated because he was a threat. Not physically, but morally. His voice, his fight for nature, for justice, had put powerful men on edge, and they had silenced him in the most permanent way. With this revelation, Amy had a choice: go public or stay quiet for the sake of peace. She chose truth. In a televised statement arranged by Lou, Amy addressed the nation. Standing in front of the ranch, her voice trembling but firm, she shared Ty's story. Not just the tragedy of his death, but the courage of his life. She spoke of the love they shared, the cause he believed in, and the silence that had nearly buried it all. "I lost the love of my life," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And for years, I tried to believe it was just fate. But now I know. It was a choice made by cowards in shadows. And I won't let Ty's legacy be defined by their lies. He stood for something. And now, so will I." The town reacted in waves, some in shock, others in awe. The authorities announced an official investigation. Travis Haynes, whose whereabouts had been unknown, was finally tracked down in another province and taken into custody for questioning. Whispers hinted he might cut a deal and expose the rest. But even as justice began to stir, Amy knew the battle wasn't over. The pain would never fully leave. The scars were permanent. But in place of silence, there was now truth. In place of grief, there was purpose. As the season finale closed, Amy stood at Ty's grave with Lindy by her side. Lindy, no longer a little girl, but a brave, curious soul like her father. She placed a small, hand-painted stone beside the headstone. It read, "I found the truth, Dad." Amy whispered, "We did it, Ty. We brought the truth into the light." And for the first time in years, the wind through the trees didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like peace. Some stories don't end when a character leaves the screen. Some stories stay alive in the hearts of those who loved them, long after the final scene fades to black. Ty Borden wasn't just a character on a show. He was a symbol of healing, of redemption, of second chances. He was the quiet strength behind Amy's journey, the reason she believed in love again. And when he was taken from her, from all of us, it felt like a piece of Heartland itself had been torn away. But sometimes, grief isn't the end of the story. Sometimes grief becomes a bridge, a path that leads us to a truth we weren't ready to face. In this season, we saw Amy stand in that pain and choose something powerful. She chose to seek the truth. She chose to ask the questions no one else dared to. She chose to open a door that had been shut for years, not knowing what she would find. And what she found changed everything. Ty's death was not just a tragedy, it was a warning, a message, a silence forced by those who feared his voice. But Amy gave him that voice back, through her courage, through her tears, through every sleepless night and every painful discovery. She brought justice to the man she loved. She brought peace to the family that was left behind. This isn't just a twist in the story, it's a reminder that love, when true, doesn't fade with time. That even in the quietest places, the truth can rise. That grief, when faced with honesty and courage, becomes a force stronger than fear. As the sun sets on season 19, we're left with more than answers. We're left with hope. Hope that healing is possible. Hope that truth, no matter how long it stays buried, can still find the light. And hope that Ty's spirit, his goodness, his strength, his love, will live on through Amy, through Lindy, and through all of us who still believe in the magic of Heartland. So, if you've ever lost someone and felt like their story ended too soon, let this be your reminder: their story isn't over. Not if you carry it forward with love, with truth, and with courage. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, share it. Let others feel what you felt, because Heartland isn't just a show, it's a journey. One we walk together, season after season, heart to heart.